Hello everyone, and welcome to another video where I take you through some of the more nuanced characters that I've created for the D&D sessions. And we just go through the character sheet, and I just sort of explain the creativity, the creative ideas, the general concepts behind just characters that I've created over the years. So this time I thought that with the recent episode of Champions of Narr'tor and a certain cameo from a very, very eccentric archery man, I thought we would go through and just take you through the basic idea of Lewie. He's a character that I created a decent while back. The basic idea was off of a I think it was a 4chan D&D greentext thread. But what it ended up being was it was an archer, but the thing is he was like a longbowman. He was like a Welsh longbowman, and what the basic concept was he would shoot an arrow up in the air, and he'd pick a square like a mile, like almost half a mile away, and he would pick that square, and he would use his animal companion to sort of see that square beforehand, so he would be able to target it, and he would shoot up into the air, and like I think 2 or 3 rounds later it would land on that square and it would hit whoever it was, and they would have no idea where the arrow came from. And so that was the basic premise for this character. So he's not quite a he's not really a dungeon delving character. He's more of a out in the open, if you're going up against like a raiding party or a bandit camp, for example, this would be like the perfect character to use for that general setting. So let's go through. I've gotten sort of a simplified 25 point buy system here for him. Basic 25 point buy is you go through and you rather than roll your stats, you spend points and progressively more points to increase your ability scores, your base ability scores, until you run out of points to the certain limit. So in this case, it's a 25 point buy, which is pretty standard across most Pathfinder games. Yeah, other than that, Lewie, 25 point buy. The player's Wooten. His race is human for the versatility and the +2 to any single ability score. His size is medium, gender male, height 5'7", weight 230, hair graying brown, eyes, wrinkled skin because he's getting a little bit old. He's 56. He's true neutral. He doesn't have a deity. Didn't really come up with a background or homeland for him. This is just the general the base sheet that I came up with for him. So he's got common, Aquan, and Orcish because I was setting him in the in Naya, so I knew that he would have common, Aquan, and then I'd give him one more language to learn. So I was just like, orcs are in the area. He'd probably know Orcish. So Orcish. So yeah, I went through, gave him his ability scores. Strength, I gave him +2 because eventually, once we get down to the weapon, he has a composite longbow +2, so that adds an additional 2 damage to his attack rolls, to his damage rolls for attacking. Dexterity, his base score was 16, but because of his racial ability score increase, it bumped it up to 18. Con is 12 because he's not really on the front lines much, so he doesn't really need to worry about dealing with getting hit. He leaves that to the frontliners, if at all. Intelligence, it's a pretty good idea to have a good intelligence for sort of a marksman, sort of a ranger. He's a slayer, which is like a ranger plus rogue hybrid class, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Wisdom for perception rolls, and charisma. He doesn't really talk much. He prefers to keep distance between him and the enemy whenever possible. So I've built him up to level 3. So this is the base level for him to make this class work, this build. So he is a Slayer. He's a sniper archetype, which we'll get into in a little bit here. And he is a Ranger, Divine Marksman archetype. It's pretty straightforward. Divine Marksman gives you some extra abilities once you get into the later levels that are specific to having a sort of ranged build. Other than that, I think we can go ahead and move on down. He's pretty smart because of, Slayer. You get 6 plus your intelligence modifier skill ranks every level. He's got pretty decent fortitude and reflex, and then Ranger gives him bonuses on fortitude and reflex as well. So he's got pretty high fortitude and reflex down here. But let's go ahead and move on down. And again, he's only level 3, so keep all this in mind. So for those of you who have played Pathfinder, you sort of know the general power level of level 3 characters. It's like the... Personally, I like to start players at level 1, but I know that Goody, for example, he likes to start people at level 3. I know Chaotic, sometimes level 5. But level 3 is it's a decent starting point. It gives the players a chance to have a bit more flexibility with their build ideas, and so level 3 is sort of where most builds just come into their own. If you remember the Wall, when he hit level 3, that was when he got actually let me pull him up here. Level 3 Wall was that was when he got 2 shield fighting. So that was literally when the build started working. So for a lot of builds, it's usually around level 3, level 5-ish. That tends to be when they come into their own. But in terms of armor class, touch, flat-footed, it's pretty typical. 17 is pretty good for about level 3. It's not too high, not too low. It's sort of in the middle. Fortitude and reflex, because of his multi-classing into Ranger and Slayer, that's going to be pretty decently high, because both of those classes share what they call good saves, good level saves, which basically means that, for example, up here you see his will save for both the Slayer and the Ranger are they're not very good. So yeah, you got the good saves and then the bad saves, and Ranger and Slayer both share a bad will save. So he's got decent fort, pretty damn good reflex, and absolutely abysmal will save. But if he's not getting hit by anything, he doesn't need to worry about that. So melee, ranged, CMB, CMD, it's pretty typical of a level 3. It's not very high. Skills, let's slide on over here. It's pretty easy. Whenever you're doing whenever you're setting up your skills, perception, sense motive, usually the 2 most important skills to roll in the game. Bluff is pretty good. Stealth for this build is nigh essential, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to build him up into eventually getting sneak attack damage. And in order to have sneak attack, you have to either catch your enemy by not let your enemy know that you're there, or catch your enemy by surprise in the initiative order. So stealth is pretty essential for this build. Base speed of 30 feet, and dex mod of 4 gives him an initiative of 4. Let's head on over to the feats and features. This is where the build just sort of gets into its own. So skilled is part of his racial. He gets +1 skill rank per level. We remember that from the wall. Slayer skill ranks, they get 6 plus their intelligence modifier. So every time they level up, they get 6 plus their intelligence skill ranks, which they can add into their skills, basically. He's proficient in simple and martial weapons, light and medium armor, shields. That's pretty typical for a ranger class. But here's where we get into the Slayer. Studied target. As a move action, you gain a +1 bonus on certain skills and attack and damage rolls against the target. Specifically, I believe that is bluff, knowledge checks, perception, sense motive, and survival checks made against that opponent. And in addition, I believe the DCs of all of your abilities against that target increase by 1. So if they're trying to resist like a bleed effect, for example, its DC increases by 1. So it's a bit difficult for a studied target to resist your damaging abilities. Next, accuracy. This is possibly the most important part of this build. Accuracy is part of the sniper archetype, and the sniper archetype for accuracy, it allows you to have all range increment penalties when making ranged attacks with a bow, crossbow, or firearm, and this replaces the track ability for the Slayer. So whenever you're attacking outside of the first range increment, you're going to take a -2 on your penalty. So you're going to take -2 penalty for every range increment beyond the first. So if your range weapon has a range of 40 feet, you can fire out up to, I believe, 10 range increments. But each range increment takes a -2 to hit. So if your range is 40 and you shoot out to 80 feet, then your 75, your range is going to your ranged attack is going to take a -2 to hit, and then if it shoots out to 110, it'll be -4, 100, 150, -6, and so on and so forth out to I guess 400 feet for that specific weapon. But we'll get into that in a little bit. So with accuracy, that range increment is now halved to -1. Well, have all range increment penalties, but later on we're gonna see what that pairs with, which is one of our feats that we pick up early on. Deadly range. The target at second level, this replaces I believe it's just an ability that the sniper picks up. Basically, whenever they're within the weapon's first range increment, they let's see, how do I word this? Okay, so sneak attacks, ranged sneak attacks typically only work within the first 30 feet. After that, it's no sneak attacks. Deadly range, because the sniper is a specific archetype, deadly range allows you, once you get this ability, to ignore that limit on sneak attack damage for the first range increment. So if your ranged weapon is 70 feet, for example, anyone within that first 70 feet can take sneak attack damage. Other than that, that's pretty much the initial build here. Later on, like you see down here, I've got it planned out up to level 10 in this sheet specifically. Level 4, he's going to pick up D6 of sneak attack and +1 charisma just to even out his odd charisma score. But over here, the Slayer talent is something that you pick up at level 2 as well. that is you can pick a variety of different abilities and stuff, but for this one we're choosing a ranger combat style for archery to pick up focused shot, which is a feat that allows you to add your intelligence to a damage roll within 30 feet. So that's pretty much all of the abilities that you pick up from your classes as you level up so far. Again, later on you're going to be adding sneak attack, and it starts hurting after a good long while. But going down to the feats, first one, point blank shot. That's pretty typical of ranged builds. It's nigh essential for most in Pathfinder. It basically just adds +1 on attack and damage rolls within 30 feet, but we're hardly going to be using this because we're a sniper. We don't want, if people are getting within 30 feet of us, they are too close. We have not done our job well. And so with that, point blank shot is basically just a prerequisite for all of the other feats that we're going to be picking up later on. So the bonus feat that we pick up at level 1 is far shot. Far shot pairs nicely with accuracy because it only it lowers the penalty for range increments to -1 by default. So whenever we shoot out to our furthest range increments, it's only going to be a small number. So we have -1 penalty for full range increment, and accuracy halves all of our range increment penalties. So our range increments are going to be, the first range increment is 0. Second is -1. Third, -1. Fourth, -2. Fifth, -2. All the way out to our 10th range increment, which is only at a -5. And if we take a move action, we can steady with bullseye shot, which is something we pick up as our class feat at well, we pick up we pick up our divine marksman at level 2, I believe. I believe that's our, what was that? What was that? What was that? How did we get that? Oh, it's just a default feat that we pick up from divine marksman. I remember now. So level 2 is when we get when we take 1 level of divine marksman, and divine marksman at first level we pick up bullseye shot as a bonus feat. Now bullseye shot lets us, as a move action, as long as we stay in our location, we can 5-foot step as a free action, but as a move action we can steady our weapon for +4 to our next range attack. So essentially, if we stay in the same location and we steady, we can bypass pretty much all of the range increment penalties, and that's just nasty. That's just nasty stuff. Once we get into what we can do with that, it's oof. There's a reason that I hardly ever bring this guy out, because when I do bring him out, the enemy can never tell what they're dealing with. They just get arrows into them, and there's nothing they can do about it. But next up, bonus feat number 3. You get that at level 3. Precise shot. That's a pretty typical one that you pick up. Normally when you're shooting into melee combat, you take a -4 to avoid hitting your allies. It's sort of a non-optional thing. You just take it rather than roll to miss your allies and hit the target. You just take a penalty, and that's sort of an easier way of dealing with combat. It sort of gives your character the ability to attack someone without risking attacking your friends. Excuse me. But yeah, so precise shot negates that entire penalty. So you can shoot into melee combat without worrying about hitting your allies just fine. You don't need to worry about that. And then level 2 Slayer, level 3 character. Slayer talent. We get our Slayer talent, which is similar to the rogue talents, and we pick up a ranger combat style for archery, which is picking up the focused shot feat. And standard action, we can add intelligence to our damage roll within 30 feet. Again, not an essential ability, but a decent one to have whenever we need it. Adding intelligence to our damage roll is a pretty strong thing when we have a +2 intelligence, and we already add +2 to our damage roll from our strength once we get down to the composite longbow that we're using. But yeah, just an additional thing to have just in case someone gets within 30 feet. Yeah, that's pretty much the class abilities and the feats. Down here we've got our armor and weapons. We've got mithril chain shirt, pretty typical. Light armor. It's mithril, so it's lighter than normal armor, and it is also it also counts as masterwork, so we can go ahead and get that enchanted later on. The great thing about this is that mithril chain shirt gives you no check penalty to your skills. So whenever you're like using agility or dexterity or strength skills like climb or acrobatics, it doesn't give you a penalty. So mithril chain shirt, especially for characters like rogues, rangers, brawlers, anyone who can wear light armor and light armor only, mithril chain shirt is a great it's a great asset to have. But now we can get down into the weapons, and now this one is essential. So the composite longbow of distance with in its strength +2. So composite longbow, first thing about that, the damage is adjusted based on your strength score. So as you can see over here, we have 1d8 plus strength 2. So whenever we roll the damage die, it'll be 1d8 plus 2. The composite longbow has a range of 110 feet normally, and the distance enchant doubles the range increment. So we have a composite longbow with a range increment of 220 feet. Now, if you remember back to the abilities that we have with the sniper, deadly range gives us any unaware target of us within our first range increment. The first attack ignores the sneak attack range limit. So later on, once we get our sneak attack, we can add that damage to anyone within 220 feet. That is a lot of damage. It's piercing damage, 3 pounds, and we've got our ammo and everything. We've got it all calculated here. Bullseye shot, that's a move action to add +4. Focus shot, point blank shot, that's all within 30 feet. I've got it all notated here. And furthest range increment. So this is the furthest we can shoot out, and it's at a -5 at 2,200 feet. So for those of you who need to calculate this, feet to kilometer, this is 2,200. That's like 2/3 of a kilometer. Now, not everyone's a physics major, but 2,200 feet. You're shooting an arrow, and it's traveling 2,200 feet in 6 seconds. That's a scary thing to deal with. You're just imagine for a moment that you are just a normal foot soldier, maybe just a normal bandit walking through the woods. You're walking down a trail, and suddenly your buddy just gets ended by an arrow that just shoots out of nowhere. You look down the street. You look down the road that you're traveling down. You see nothing. 6 seconds pass, and another arrow shoots. You start panicking. You run behind a tree. Your other comrades are still trying to figure out what they're dealing with. Another 6 seconds pass. Another arrow. Another 6 seconds. Another arrow. And so on, and so on, and so forth. Ah. And later on, it'll add... This just gets stupid crazy once things really start ramping up. Once you start enchanting this to do more damage, to have different abilities like Bane or Holy or some other crazy shit. Once you start going down the Vital Strike tree, it's a nasty thing to deal with. And other than that, Hunter's outfit, snowshoes, neck guard, pocketed scarf, barbed vest, tabard. That's pretty much it. Level 3 sniper. Lewie is he is the artillery. He is the artillery of the team. The artillery, if you will. So yeah. I hope you enjoyed this. I imagine it's going to be a lot shorter than the one that I did for the wall. But yeah, I hope this was informative. I hope it helped you get inspiration for a possible build that you want to try. In due time, I'm hoping to do something with just about every build that I've ever made, just to see if the interest is there. And yeah. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.